Through My Eyes by Ruby Bridges. This is a true story and took place in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1960. This book is not a storybook. It's more of a memory book with photographs from this time in Ruby's life, along with various people writing their memories of that time. I will be reading this book a little differently this time. I am going to share her story with you using the pictures from her book. Ruby was born in a small cabin in rural Mississippi. We were very poor, very, very poor, Ruby said. My daddy worked picking crops. There were times when we didn't have much to eat. The people who owned the land were bringing in machines to pick the crops, so my daddy lost his job, and that's when we had to move. In 1957, the family moved to New Orleans. Ruby's father became a gas station attendant. Her mother took care of the children during the day. After they were tucked in bed, Ruby's mother went to work scrubbing floors in a bank. When it was time for me to start kindergarten, I went to the Johnson Lockett Elementary School. My segregated school was fairly far from my home, but I had lots of company for the long walk. All the kids on my block went to Johnson Lockett. I loved school that year, and my teacher, Mrs. King, was warm and encouraging. She was black, as all the teachers in black schools were back then. Mrs. King was quite old, and she reminded me of my grandmother. Even though the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled in 1954 that public schools could no longer be segregated or separate for black and white children, the schools were still segregated at the time Ruby and her family moved to New Orleans. With this system, black children did not receive the same education as white children. Black children were given old, used, out-of-date books. The black segregated school buildings were not well cared for, and often teachers had not finished college. In 1960, a New Orleans judge ordered 4 black girls to go to 2 white elementary schools in that city. 3 of the girls, Leona, Tessie, and Gail, were sent to McDonough Elementary School. Ruby was sent to 1st grade in the William Frantz Elementary School. The men you see in this picture with the students are like police for the federal government, called federal marshals. It was their job to escort the girls to school and make sure they were safe. The crowds here are people that didn't want these girls to come to their school, simply because they were different. They were black, not white. On Ruby's first day, a large crowd of angry white people gathered outside the Frantz Elementary School. They carried signs that said they didn't want black children in their school. People called Ruby names. Some wanted to hurt her. They were trying to bully her and keep her from going to school. It was the President of the United States who ordered these federal marshals to walk with Ruby into the school building. They carried guns in case the crowd got out of control, but they didn't have to use them. Every day for weeks that turned into months, Ruby walked to school through angry crowds with the marshals protecting her. Ruby would hurry through the crowd and not say a word. The white people in the neighborhood would not send their children to school with Ruby because they didn't want their white children to be around a black child. After Ruby got inside the building every day, she was all alone in her classroom except for her teacher, Mrs. Henry. She had no other children in her classroom. I'm going to read you an excerpt of something that Mrs. Henry said. There was a certain shyness about Ruby. She would appear at the door of our room in the morning and walks in slowly, taking little steps. I would always greet her with a compliment about how nicely she was dressed to make her feel special, as she was, and to make her feel more welcome and comfortable. We would hug, and then we would sit down side by side. We had our corner of the room, and it was cozy. I never sat in the front of the classroom apart from her. If I went to the blackboard, she was always right there with me. I grew to love Ruby and to be awed by her. It was an ugly world outside, but I tried to make our world together as normal as possible. Neither one of us ever missed a day. It was important to keep going. In Ruby's words, the first week of school was very tense with all the crowds of people out front. Here I am, all ready to go to school. Soon it was Thanksgiving, and I had a week off. I had fun playing with my friends in the neighborhood. After Christmas, my teacher and I settled into a routine. Being Mrs. Henry's only student wasn't a chore. It was fun, and I felt special. She was like my best friend. We did everything together, reading and word puzzles, spelling and math. I couldn't go outside, so we did jumping jack exercises in the classroom. Near the end of the school year, some white students slowly joined Ruby at France Elementary. They would come and visit Ruby in her classroom. Then it was June and school was over. Ruby said goodbye to Mrs. Henry and went home for her summer vacation. By second grade, there were no longer any angry crowds of white people waiting for Ruby outside of school. Second grade found Ruby in an integrated classroom with both white and black children. The school had been successfully desegregated. Ruby went on to graduate from France Elementary School and high school in New Orleans. Today, she is married to a building contractor and has 4 sons. She spends her time traveling around the country talking to people about her experiences in first grade and what it was like to be a part of change in our country's history. I'll leave you with something Ruby's mother says about her. Our Ruby taught us a lot. She became someone who helped change our country. She was part of history just like generals and presidents are part of history. They're leaders. And so was Ruby. She led us away from hate and led us nearer to knowing each other, the white folks and the black folks. The end.